entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?
What's up, guys? So I'm about to teach you everything you need to know about Sacred Seals in Elden Ring and everything you need to know about basically incantation damage. So let's get into it. So we start off with the Finger Seal, which is what the Prophet class starts off with, very basic seal. And the first thing I want you guys to look at is under attack power, where you would see your weapon damage, physical damage, magic damage, whatever on a regular weapon. You see something called Incant Scaling there at the bottom. On this one, it's 174. That basically is the equivalent of, you have a sword and it does, 200 damage. It says right there in the physical is 100 plus, let's say you have 100 scaling, so it's 100 plus 100 physical. So you do 200 damage with that weapon. Well, this is what you use for that, for the damage on your incantations. So it's the same concept. It's just how we get our incantation damage. So just like on a weapon, you have attribute scaling down there at the bottom. On this one, it's E and C. So, we're going to talk about that more later, how it scales to your attributes and how the different seals scale with different attributes. Obviously faith being the primary one with incantation base damage on a sacred seal. So here we have a finger seal. The other side of that is this is a base level finger seal. If we go to the finger seal plus 25, right, a maxed finger seal where we use smithing stones and upgraded all the way. Now all of a sudden with the exact same faith stat, like the same stats, same character, our incantation scaling is now 324. So that's a huge jump in damage. Our faith scaling is now S scaling and D strength scaling. So you get a ton more damage just from using smithing stones to level this up at the exact same stat breakpoint. So very important to note that the level of your seal is very important when calculating damage, and in terms of how well it scales with your stats. And then obviously the next most important thing would be those relative stats for that particular sacred seal. And we'll cover stat scaling in depth later, but right now the main point that I want to drive home and make sure you guys understand is that the incant scaling number is the number that they use to multiply out to decide how much damage your incantation is going to do. Every incantation in the game has a fixed number that it uses to multiply your incantation scaling number by in order to determine how much damage that is going to do when it hits an enemy. So let's give a nice, clean, real-world example here. We're going to use Vike's Dragon Bolt, right? Because it just applies electric damage to our weapon. And so we're just going to take a nice physical damage weapon here. And you can see in the character status screen on the far right that this S-Stock does 387 physical damage. Nothing special about it, just does physical damage. We're going to take the Vike's Dragon Bolt incantation, and we're going to use that incantation multiplier that I was telling you about, which on Vikes is 0.75. So 75% of your incantation scaling score, which is 174 on this one. So we're going to take 174 times 0.75 and get 131. Then we're going to add that to the 387 on our weapon, and we should end up with 518. Then on the finger seal plus 25, we have the 324 incant scaling, so we should see that times 0.75, which is 243, plus the base damage on the weapon of 387, we should see 630 damage. So let's run this test, starting with the non-upgraded finger seal, and we can check and see here on the right that we have exactly 518 damage now on our right-hand armament 3, which is exactly what we thought we would get, which means that that incantation did the exact amount of damage that we thought it would do. So then we'll test it again with the plus 25 finger seal and see if we get that 630 damage that we expect to see. And there you go. So 630 damage in the right hand column on your screen there now. So exactly what we expected to happen. So all that did was prove, the point that I was trying to make, that every incantation in the game has a fixed multiplier. There's a fixed number that it uses. And that multiplier is just multiplied by your incantation scaling stat, which is why I tell everybody the importance of the incant scaling stat on their sacred seal, because it's directly responsible for the damage you're doing with an incantation based on the formula used. So here's some exceptions to that rule. The special sacred seals, like the Gravelstone seal, where it says in the passive effects, boosts Dragon Cult incantations. that in this situation, the Gravelstone, that's 15% more damage on all these Lightning, Dragon Cold incantations. With the Giant Seal, it boosts Giant's Flame incantations. It actually gives you 20% more damage with those Fire incantations, the Giant's Flame incantations. And so then you go down the line and like the Dragon Communion Seal boosts Dragon Communion incantations, and then the Golden Order Seal boosts Fundamentalist incantations, and there's a couple other like the Claw, and they all have their own, special passive effects, except for the Erdtree Seal, which just has a naturally extremely high incant scaling score, but doesn't have a passive effect. So we'll get more into the role that the Erdtree Seal plays later, though. For this part of the video, though, I just really want the takeaway to be the understanding that, these passive effects are extremely powerful to where if the incant scaling score is relatively close, then generally you're going to surpass the Erdtree Seal if you are using that specific type of incantation. So like, for example, if you're using a Dragon Cold incantation, the Gravelstone Seal is going to surpass the Erdtree Seal because that 15%, you take this incant scaling of 318 and you multiply that times 1.15, that 15%, and it's the equivalent of a 365 incant scaling score. So now we see the Gravelstone Seal surpassing the Erdtree Seal in power with things like Lightning Spear or Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike, and we'll get more on all that stuff later. So let's give a real world example of that with Lightning Spear. Let's go throw a Lightning Spear at something with the Erdtree Seal and then do it with the Gravelstone. So here's the Gravelstone, 923 damage. And then here's the Erdtree Seal, 893. So there's a real world scenario where we can show the Gravelstone out damaging the Erdtree Seal, even though it has a much lower incant scaling stat because of that 15% boost that it's receiving from the passive effects. So now let's look at the incant scaling across a couple different builds. So here's a Pure Faith build. Our Gravelstone Seal is at 318 incant scaling. So that's pretty good, right? Anything above 300 is really good. So Finger Seal, 324, really good. Erdtree Seal, 353, very good. Golden Order Seal is unusable. We don't have enough intelligence. Dragon Communion Seal is not very good, 196, and the Giant Seal is very good at 307. You have to take into account those are very good if they have the special passive effect, right? Because that percentage base increase. So next we're going to look at a Int Faith hybrid where we split up the 87 points that I have between Int and Faith in my build available. So now we have 43 Int and 44 Faith. So this is the damage stat distribution that you would see on something like a Sword of Night and Flame build or a hybrid build like that. Gravelstone Seal, you're going to see a huge loss all the way down to 231 on the incant scaling. Finger Seal is going to come all the way down to 234. The Erdtree Seal, we're going to see come all the way down to 224. The Golden Order Seal takes off, and we see it go all the way up to 332. The Dragon Communion Seal, we're going to see at 180, so down a little bit. And then Giant Seal, another one, just huge loss. So now at this point, this is the only seal you're going to want to use on this build. If you're a hybrid Int Faith build, use the Golden Order Seal, no matter if it's the Dragon Incantations, the Giant Incantations, doesn't matter. There's no way you make up with that 15%, 100 something incant scaling. It's just, this is the one you want to stick with. So, the next build we're going to talk about is similar to this, but Faith Arcane hybrid. So we're going to split up that 90 points that we have between Faith and Arcane to begin with into 45-45 and see what the best seal is going to be. So the Gravelstone is going to take a pretty significant loss again with that loss of Faith down to 234. We expect that, right? Any S scaling Sacred Seal losing 40 Faith. 237 on the Finger Seal, so still pretty rough. The Erdtree Seal still struggling, 227. Not great damage potential there now. We're back to not being able to use the Golden Order Seal. And then the Dragon Communion Seal now at 336. So clearly way ahead. And then Giant Seal 227, so still same thing. So just like we saw with the Dragon Communion Seal on the Int hybrid build, if you're like a Bleed Faith hybrid build, use the Dragon Communion Seal on everything, every incantation that you cast, because nothing else, even with the passive effects, will come even close for you. Alright guys, so now we're going to use some data to get into what is the best seal in the game for you, for your build. Before we do so, I kind of want to get into, I have 3 different kind of stat breakpoints in terms of like, how many stat points you have available. The first one's going to be the most important because we're using 80 stat points. So that's, saying that like most of you will finish the game with, let's say, your faith build with about 80 points available to put into your faith, or if you're a faith dex hybrid, you got 40, whatever the case may be. You've got about 80 points available after, taking care of your vigor, endurance, mind, whatever other stuff you've got to put points into. So at the breakpoint of 80 available damage stats, we're going to look at the scaling, and we're going to look at the regular incant scaling. And so, for example, what that would be is I went in, and if it was something where the stat scaling was semi-equal between, the two stat scaling, like you had AA, for example, the Golden Order seal, which scales equally in Int and Faith, we were at like 40-40 there. And if it was something that, for example, like the Gravelstone seal that scaled S in Faith, but only a D in Strength. So at that point, I put all 80 into Faith because you got a much higher incant scaling overall rather than splitting up 40-40 into a D scaling and a S scaling. So that's how I got the incant scaling to get the maximum, the best case scenario for incant scaling with 80 points possible. The relative scaling is going to be the incant scaling, and you notice on the finger seal it's the same because the 324 and 324 because there's no special passive available. Well, for let's say for example the giant seal is 307 and it's 368. That 368 is the 307 times 20% additional. So it's basically 307 times 1.2 for that additional 20% that you get when you use a giant's incantation, like a fire incantation. So that you would know that if you're using that type of incantation, it is worth it to use over the seal that happened to have the asterisk next to it in the regular incant scaling column, right? So we're saying that, hey, the best seal, for example, on this sheet here, the Erdtree seal and the regular incant scaling is 353. That's the highest incant scaling available out of that column. So that's obviously the best seal damage-wise, based off the damage formula for how, incantation damage is calculated. But if you were to use, like let's say a lightning spear or something, you would do a lot more damage with the Gravelstone seal with the 366 versus the 353 in the adjusted, relative scaling column. So that's just showing that if you see that the asterisk in the right column there with the relative scaling, that if you're using a incantation that happens to fall under the special passives for that seal, that it's worth it to use that seal over the seal that has the asterisk next to it in the first column. So I hope that makes sense. If you have questions, ask in the comments. But basically what we're saying here is that, if you're just playing through the game, you don't want to switch seals, use the Erdtree seal if you've got, the points to put in and your faith build. Definitely go with the Erdtree seal. Obviously, if you are a Sword Knight and Flame build, you kind of have to go with the Golden Order seal or any of those like hybrid, Dragon Communion seal. If you're like a bleed faith hybrid, you're going to be kind of bottlenecked in that Dragon Communion seal because it's going to do a lot more damage if you don't have the faith available to really push 80 faith to maximize your potential with the like Giants, Gravelstone, Erdtree, all those kind of things. So at that point, it's not really a conversation anymore of switching seals. But on a pure faith build, this is showing which seals are worth. In the second column, we're showing which seals on a faith build especially are worth switching to if you're casting those particular incantations. And this really applies mostly to the Giants and Gravelstone seal because the fire and lightning spells seem to be, at least from if you're following, like a build like one of my builds or one of the kind of popular meta builds, that's what you're going to be using the most because they're kind of the most efficient incantations. I keep wanting to say spells. The most efficient incantations in terms of like how useful they are and how much damage they deal. So I'd say in the conversation, just like full transparency, Giant Seal, Gravelstone Seal matter the most. And unless you're really into like the dragon stuff, which I mean, at that point, hey, Dragon Communion Seal, you see it right there in the second column, clear as day. Incredible, definitely worth using if you're going to use the dragon spells, right? So because that 362 adjusted relative scaling is higher than the 353. So in summary, basically use the Erdtree seal, unless you're consistently using an incantation that falls into the schools of either the special passive abilities from the either Godslayer, Giants, Gravelstone, or Dragon Communion seals. Because if it falls under the purview of those passives, where you get the additional damage increase, then those four are worth it. The rest of them are not worth switching over from an Erdtree seal, so you can save your smithing stones and all that stuff, and not bother with like the claw mark, the golden order, the frenzied flame, or the finger seal. Obviously, in most situations, the finger seal is going to be pretty much obsolete. And so that kind of sums up where we're at in terms of you have 80 damage dealing stats available. And so then we'll start looking into, hey, you leveled up significantly more and you've got 80 stats available in two different stats. You've got 160 stat points available for damage dealing stats. And let's look at that. All right, so let's say you're in New Game Plus 7 and you're like, all right, man, well, I'm way past that. I need to know, I've got a lot of stat points available. I need to know what the best Sacred Seal is for me. So let's say you've got 160 points available, right? So you've done your Vigor, all that stuff, and you got 80 Vigor, 80 Endurance and stuff, and you're like, well, what's the best, with 80 and 80? I've got 160 points available. I can go 80 Int, 80 Faith, or 80 Arcane and 80 Faith, and what's the best available with 160 points available? Well, let's dive right into it. I mean, now that we know how to read, this sheet, we can say, okay, well, right off the bat, we know that the Erdtree seal is out and the Golden Order seal is in. So at this point, you've got 80 of each. The new best seal for just regular scaling, just going around and not worrying about any sort of passive effects. Golden Order seal is the clear winner. The Dragon Community seal is a pretty close second. If you're, let's say, instead of 80 and 80 Faith, if you're running like a Bleed Faith hybrid build where you've got 80 Arcane and 80 Faith, then I mean you're very, very close second. So for the sake of the argument, those are by far the two best just general incant scaling at this stat breakpoint. If you look at the relative scaling, it's no longer worth it at all to switch from either the Golden Order seal or the Dragon Communion seal for things like the Giants incantations or the Dragon Golden incantations with the Gravelstone seal. It's just not worth it at this point because they'll do less damage than just sticking with the Golden Order or the Dragon Communion. So we see the adjusted where the Dragon Communion actually squeezes out a little bit more damage if you're using a incantation that falls under the purview of the Dragon Communion seal, right? So you're using a Dragon incantation. You're going to see more incant scale, and same with the Golden Order seal. You're going to see more damage there, if you're using those types of spells. But again, the most utilitarian spells and the most efficient spells damage-wise, like your Giant's Flame Take Thee and stuff like that, your Lightning Spear, your the spells that you're going to be using a lot of, are generally not going to be worth switching your seal for anymore, which is kind of a good thing in terms of overall convenience. To just say, hey, I've got one seal and it's the best at what it does, especially if you're a Faith Int hybrid or a Faith Arcane hybrid. You could say, well, yeah, definitely I can just stick with because I wouldn't even bother switching, at that point, unless you're using like the Dragon Communion seal and wanted to cast something that would benefit from the passive damage increase on the Golden Order seal, and incantation from that family of incantations, then it would be worth switching to the Golden Order seal maybe, but it's very, very minimal difference at that point. So, these are the two best at this point in the game, by far. And if you're not specking into Intelligence or Arcane, then we're looking at the Erdtree seal as the next best. In which case, obviously, if you're running the Erdtree with the 353, you look at the relative scaling, then you're still like Giants, Gravelstone. It's still worth it to switch because you go up to 368 and 366 respectively there with the 15 and the 20 and 15% increases respectively. So that's because the Erdtree Seal only scales off Faith, and the extra 80 points you're getting from being that with the availability of those 160 points instead of 80, you get no benefit on the Erdtree Seal because it only scales in Faith, and Faith can only go so high, right? So before, and especially, I mean, past 80 on your last incantation soft cap, there's really not much point in going in there any further. So let's talk now about the final slide, which would be you took your character all the way up to 99 in each stat to max level because you have a lot of time on your hands. So let's cover that. All right, so our last slide, we're going to say, you've got 99 points and everything. At this point, the best overall and just kind of, at this point, it doesn't matter what your build is, right? You got 99 into everything. The Golden Order Seal pulls ahead. Again, Dragon Communion is pretty close behind. And then surprisingly, the Frenzy Flame Seal finally starts to pull up, and that's because it pulls its scaling from 4 different stats. The problem is that its scaling is so low with those 4 stats to where you have to get, obviously, as you see, like almost a 99 into everything to really get to a point where you're starting to see any sort of real scaling, because you've got that, S scaling and Faith and stuff on a lot of those other seals. It's just hard to compete. But at this point, as you can clearly see, though, Frenzy Flame has entered the conversation. But yeah, I mean, Golden Order and Dragon Seal are still on top. And then, in terms of relative scaling, same thing, Golden Order Dragon, and then now Frenzy, because that huge 20% boost from Frenzied, and the fact that it's now 400, and 20% of 400 is a significant amount. I mean, a big 80 point boost in the relative scaling department. Well, now it's worth it to switch to Frenzy Flame Seal as well for Frenzy Incantations. So at this point, in the game, if you really want to maximize like your damage, like min-max, and you're using Frenzy Flame stuff, then, put the Golden Order Seal away and grab the Frenzy, or, if you're doing a lot of dragon attacks, and you find yourself consistently using them, then yeah, go ahead and grab the Dragon Communion Seal and pull that out when you're playing. But for the most part, at that point, for, like we said, a lot of the spells that you're going to be, using a lot, if you're using, the most common spells, your Lightning Spear and stuff like that, then you're probably just going to have the Golden Order Seal out the entire time. But this is all pretty hypothetical, right? Because 99.9% of us, and myself included probably, will never see 99 points into all stats. So, I just wanted to throw it out there, because there's a lot of questions on Reddit and stuff like that of people saying, hey, if I have a max level character, what's the best seal? So now we answered that question too, but at this point, like going this far into it, I feel like this video has gotten a little bit long and I'm almost borderline rambling at this point. So, even with data, it just feels like rambling. So I'm just going to kind of leave you with that and say, hey, the basic, summary is early game, right, with the access to early Somber Stones, because you can get up to Somber Stone 9, and if you go and look at my like OP in 15 minute or OP in 20 minute guide videos, because I've got several of them, and you see that we're getting to a +9 weapon, which a somber weapon +9 is the equivalent of like a +24 regular smithing stone weapon, right? So it's just an insanely powerful weapon, and you just don't have the access to, all those smithing stones 7 and smithing stone 8s and smithing stone 6s early in the game like you do, and you only need one of those somber stones for each one. So you need one somber stone 1 through 9 and one of each, and then you've got a +9 weapon. So because of that, the Erdtree Seal, if you did follow my OP Faith or Faith OP in 20-minute guide, a lot of questions on that video were, hey, why the Erdtree Seal instead of the the Gravelstone Seal? And the answer is simple. It's like, well, you got to get into the capital, which, yeah, I have a guide video on how to wrong warp there. I found that a couple weeks back, and that was huge in my challenge run. That's actually how I found it. Was I was doing my one-shot challenge run, and I was like, how can I get access to the Gravelstone Seal? Because I didn't know what I knew now, that early on the Erdtree Seal is incredibly more powerful than the Gravelstone Seal. So I actually found a way to wrong warp into the capital. So if you're curious about that too, I got a guide video. Just go look through my channel for the capital wrong warp. But you have to wrong warp in there, and then you have to level up the Gravelstone Seal, which you can grab the Dectus medallions and go up and hit the the tunnels, but really you can only get the bearings for up to I think like a plus 12, and a plus 12 gravelstone seal does not even come close to the power of a plus 9 earth tree seal. It's just like, even with the 15% damage boost on lightning seals, it's just absolutely not even in the arena of the same amount of damage. So that's why the earth tree seal is king early, because easy access to somber stones all the way up to plus 9. And you won't see anything overtake that until you get your gravelstone seal. If you're using lightning and your gravelstone seal is, I think, like plus 22 or something like that, is when it, or maybe plus 23, is when it would start to overtake a plus 9 earth tree seal. So like that's why, to answer the question that I've gotten a lot in the comment section, that's why earth tree seal is the king early game. And as you guys have seen through all the data, that the earth tree seal is really the king for a faith build through the entire game, except when you have put in the time and farmed up everything to get the giants and the gravelstone seal up to plus 25, and you happen to be using giant slam take or the lightning spear, or the ancient dragon lightning strike or something like that, is the only point where you would see that take over. But if you're just kind of running around, or you're doing like pest threads or something like that, the earth tree seal is still the way. So that's to just kind of break it down into like spark notes. Earth tree seal is the best early. Earth tree seal is still the best later on, unless you happen to have the giants or gravelstone completely leveled up, at which point you're min-maxing and trying to squeeze out every little bit of damage. Then you would switch to them for those particular incantations. And then obviously if you're a hybrid build, Arcane, Faith, Dragon Communion Seal is the only option. Nothing else even comes close with the passives. If you happen to be a Int Faith hybrid, then Golden Order Seal is by far the best seal that you can use. And I like, again, nothing else, even with the extra 15 or 20% damage bonus that they receive, would even come close to being worth using. And that's pretty much it, guys. So I hope this was helpful information, and I hope it answered a lot of the questions that I was getting on the channel. And basically, just like, the thing to remember is that when it comes to how incantation damage is calculated, it directly comes off your incant scaling, and it takes that number and it multiplies it by the set multiplier, whatever the number is for the incantation you're using. So your incant scaling is extremely important, and it directly correlates to the damage you're going to do. So if you're trying to maximize your damage, make sure that you're using the seal that you have at the time, whatever you have leveled seal wise. If you've got an archery seal at plus 3, and you've got a finger seal at plus 18, and the incant scaling is higher on your finger seal, then obviously use that, because that incant scaling number is the number that they use to calculate the damage you're doing with a incantation. And so a lot of people are wondering, like, why is the Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike, my go-to as well, that multiplier, right? So we said it was like 0.75 for Vikes. Well, we don't have the data yet on what the Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike is, but I know that it's insane, because I know each strike hits like, an absolute truck in late game. And as you saw in like my one-shot challenge run, doing, I don't even remember if we hit the Elden Beast for, it was like 25 or 35,000 damage. But that's because, we were hitting for, I think, like 2 or 3,000 per strike after his resists, accounted for and adjusted, my damage. At that point, we hit him for, anywhere from 12 to 20 strikes, and that's the reason why, we hit it so much. But that's why I like Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike so much, because not only does it have the capability of hitting so many times, but the actual inherent multiplier used to calculate your damage for that skill is really, really high compared to a lot of other incantations. So I hope this video gave you at least a basic understanding of what seal is the best seal for you to be running, and then gave you some basic knowledge on how incantation damage is calculated, so that you can sort of maximize the damage that you're doing with incantations based on the choice that you're making with your sacred seal, and that you understand the importance of that incant scaling stat on your sacred seal and its direct correlation to how much damage you're doing. So before I go, if you're new to the channel, and you head over to the channel and you go to my playlists, we have everything organized really well for you guys to easily find all the content that you might need to find. All of our skips and wrong warps, like how to wrong warp to Nokron or how to get into the capital really early with the wrong warp, is in there. Our OP in 20 minutes guides, and then the 2-hour full walkthrough stream that would accompany that guide, all those are right in there. All of our endgame build guides are going to be here. So the 3-in-1 bleed guide, the endgame one-shot faith build, all that stuff will be in here. Then the area route guides would be in here. So like all sites of grace in the capital, or stuff like that. Mechanics and game explanations will be here. So if you're looking for like the best armor and stuff and want to see some data there, farming locations like where the gold fireflies and stuff like that to make gold pickle foul feet, all the actual like most efficient like real best farming areas. Item location quick guides, Lord of Blood exaltation, stuff like that to pick up things for the build. I'm starting to do stuff like that, and they're all in there. I think we got 15 in there right now. And then if you're into like other stuff, like my Dragon Age trilogy solo nightmare runs, or some other challenge runs I did, like my Dark Souls one-shot challenge run back in the day, where we one-shot every boss in the game at soul level 1. Some Inquisition stuff, Demon Souls challenge runs like soul level 1, no hit. All kinds of cool stuff, but it's all organized really nice for you guys to find whatever it is that you guys are looking for. And if you're having trouble navigating the channel, hopefully that will help those of you that were struggling, because I get asked all the time like, hey, I really like this OP in 20 minutes astrology guide, like, are you going to do more? And I'm like, well, there's a whole folder there, man, with all of them already done for you. So hopefully this helps you guys that are new to the channel find some of that stuff. And again, thanks for watching all this stuff, and thank you so much for like all the support we've had, especially in the recent weeks with the Elden Ring content. It really means a lot to us. So thanks again, and hope you guys enjoyed the video, and we'll see you guys on the next one, probably the strength build in the next day or two. In the meantime, you guys stay safe or stay dangerous, and enjoy your weekend.